All right, the recording's in progress. So, has anyone noticed that there are more deals falling out of escrow? Have you noticed that? Have you heard that in the news? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes,
yep.
yes.
Yeah, it has been. We are seeing more and more deals fall out of escrow, certainly compared to the last couple of years. And, it's been widespread, and it's not just our area. This is kind of a national thing. I try to pay attention to the real estate market as much as I can. It's a widespread thing that deals are falling out of escrow. Now, sometimes we can't do anything about it. It just is what it is. Okay. Deals are going to fall out. That's part of life. But there are some preventive measures we can put in place to limit the chances of a deal falling out of escrow, both if we're representing the seller and the buyer. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Some things to prevent deals from falling out of escrow, just some steps you can take, some ideas that you can push forward, some things that you can do to make sure that when you get into escrow, that deal closes. Because it can certainly be frustrating when a deal falls out of escrow. Okay. Especially if you're working with a buyer. Because if you're working with a buyer, you have to go find another escrow. If you're working with a seller, at least you still have a listing. Okay? But either way, it can be very frustrating. All right, so let's jump into this. Some of this stuff is not new. Okay, just like any of the other classes we do, there's a lot of this stuff is not new. But here's what I want you to think about as we go through this stuff. Okay, is number one is this. Okay, well, this isn't new. But are you actually applying it to your business? Some of you are, some of you may not be. Okay, but to keep that in mind, this isn't new, but am I applying it to my business? Okay. The second thing is, wow, that's new. I should apply it to my business. Okay. And the third thing that I would say is well, I don't really want to apply that to my business, and then ask yourself, well, why not? I'm not saying that everything I say here is the end all be all to everything, but if there's some of this stuff comes up and you start thinking, well, I don't really need to do that. Okay, well, why not? And what's the downfall if you did do it? Okay, so there's some things to keep in mind as we go through this stuff here and preventing deals from falling out of escrow. All right, so let's jump into this. Take out your notepads, your iPads, whatever the hell you take notes on. All right, let's just go ahead and jump into this. Okay, preventing deals from falling out of escrow. They're not written in any particular order of importance. It's just how they're written. Number one and most important thing in terms of preventing deals from falling out of escrow. I wrote this on my notes first, and I wrote it in all caps. Motivation. Motivation. You need to constantly be asking questions to figure out what's their motivation, but not the base motivation, that dig deeper, more deep into their motivation. When you get a listing or you get a client and you bring it on a coaching call and we say, hey, I got this. What's typically the first question that someone like Neil or myself will ask if you have a lead?
Why are they selling?
Motivation?
Yeah, what's their motivation? Why are they selling? Exactly. Why are they buying? What's their motivation? If a seller is not motivated, are they going to be in a rush to reduce their price?
No.
If a buyer is not motivated, are they going to be in a rush to raise their price?
No.
Are they going to be... Has anyone ever seen an inspection report that came back completely clean? Anyone ever seen an inspection report like that?
Nope.
I did the inspection, and you know what? House is perfect. Absolutely not. The inspection report comes back, and it looks like it's a strong wind away from the house falling down. So if the buyer's not motivated, they're going to ask for every repair to be done. And if the seller's not motivated, they're not going to do any of those repairs. Then you're going to have a problem. Motivation is number one. But I wrote down here, again, don't just use the base motivation. Dig deeper. Well, why are you selling? Well, we need a bigger house. Don't stop there. Well, they're selling because they need a bigger house. Done. Let's move forward. Why do you need a bigger house? What's the significance of the bigger house? What's important about buying right now? Well, we want to downsize. We want a smaller house. What's the significance of a smaller house? Why do you want to buy a smaller house? Don't just use the base. Dig deeper. Find out what's really going on. And then when you know that throughout the process, both the listing process, the buying process, the escrow process, constantly revert back to their motivation. All right, so the appraisal report came in. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer came in right here at this value, which is really great. We're now at day 12. 20 days from now, boom, you're going to be in that brand new house with that pool. Doesn't that sound exciting? Great. Yes, because that's exactly what your kids wanted, right? Right. Okay. All right, we're almost there. Right? Like I'm constantly reverting back to that motivation throughout the process, because will something come up in every escrow process that will become some form of issues? Yes or no? Yeah. Almost every escrow process has an issue. So if I'm constantly reverting back to their motivation, when that issue comes up, it's not as big of a deal. If I keep reminding them why they're going to that bigger house, why they're going to that smaller house, why they're selling this house, when that little issue comes up, it stays little. I have to constantly revert back to their motivation. And then whenever that issue comes up, it's even more. So now imagine an issue comes up and they're like, I want to back out of this deal. And all you know is that they want a bigger house. Well, you wanted that bigger house, right? And you can't go any deeper than that. There's no emotional connection. But if I know the real reason they need a bigger house, then I can create that emotional connection when they say, gosh, the inspections, there's too much going on with the inspection. We don't want this house. Well, let's talk about this, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. I mean, you said you wanted a bigger house, right? Right. And you wanted that because X, I can create the emotional attachment to it. But if all I know is the base, I got nothing. Constantly asking about their motivation and then constantly reverting back to their motivation throughout the process. Let me give you an example. You have a buyer, and let's say the buyer wants to move into this school district because they want their kid to go to this specific high school for whatever the reason may be. But let's say they say, well, my kid is really good with art and they want to pursue that. And this high school has well known in the area to have a direct access to some people over at Disney in their art department. And so it's well known that this high school, if you want to get into art, that this high school has some connection. So I want my kid to go to this high school. So we want to buy in this area. Okay, that sounds great. So then you say, all right, so now let's just talk about this, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. If you don't buy a house in this school district to get to this high school and you stay where you are right now, what will you do? Well, I don't want them to go to the school that we're in right now, so we'd have to probably just pay for private school. That would be the next best thing. Okay. And how much is private school? And let's say they go, well, it's $10,000 a year. Right. 4 years of high school. For some of us, it was 5. No big deal. Or some of you will get that later. 4 years of high school, $10,000 a piece is $40,000 for that school, right? Right. Okay, great. So now I know the base motivation. I know the story behind all this thing. So now let's say they come up, they go through they're in the process, they find a house, they're in escrow in the school district they want, and the inspection comes back and they're $10,000 apart. They want this much money, sellers want to give this much money, they're $10,000 apart from getting this house. And they go, gosh, I don't know, I think I want to back out. Well, let's, before we back out, let's talk about this. Now, you said you wanted to be in this house because of the school district, right? Right. And if you don't buy this house, you mentioned that you were going to put your kid in private school, right? And do you remember how much you said that was? About $40,000.
I haven't done one of these houses.
All right. So we can either pay the $10,000 to get this house to go to the high school that you want your kid to go to, or stay in your current house and pay $40,000. Which would you rather do? Well, I guess in that case, I'll just pay the $10,000. Exactly. So if I know I can't just stop at the base motivation. I have to dig deeper, because at some point when that issue comes up, I can really connect with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right, good. So motivation, number one, end all be all for sellers, buyers, the whole thing. Motivation. All right, thanks for being here. Hope you have a great rest of your day. All right, no, okay, we'll talk more. Fine. All right, I wrote down here number 2, preventing deals from out of escrow. I put down here the contract. 3 points under the contract in terms of helping a deal fall out of escrow, or preventing a deal falling out of escrow. Wrote down here number 1, you have to really know the contract. You have to really know the contract. What does the contract say? What's on the contract? Who's liable for what? Who's paying what? You have to really know the contract. The base contract. I'm talking about the base contract. Because one of the problems that I was doing some research on this, of deals falling out of escrow, is something comes up and the buyer or seller said, no, we're not doing that. And then it turns out, well, it was in the contract. The contract says this. And then they go to the agent, and now they're upset with the agent because they didn't know that was in the contract. You need to know the contract, okay? So take some time to really study and know that contract. And if you need Cindy's help, get Cindy's help. I wrote down here, not just knowing the contract, but I wrote down here number 2 is, can you read and articulate the contract to a client in terms that they understand? Can you read and articulate the contract to the client in terms that they understand? Because if you gave that contract to your clients, are they going to, first of all, are they going to read it?
Mm-hmm.
No. And even if they did read it, would they fully understand all the terminology in there?
Nope.
Because they're not in this business. It would be the same thing for us, right? If someone said, hey, we're signing you up for this aerospace engineering program, we just need you to sign this contract. Okay. And then there's like words in there that have like 14 letters in it. You're like, high school education. Can we split that into 3 words, please? All right. So can you read the contract and articulate it to the client in terms that they understand? Because if they don't understand the terms and they don't understand what's on the contract, then they're not paying attention, and then that's going to come back and bite you later. Know the contract. Can you read and articulate the contract to the client? And number 3, discuss the terms with the clients before it hits the paper and make sure they understand. Now, I wrote this down here because I'm not just saying like verbally telling them the terms. It's okay, I'm telling you the terms. Now I'm about to put this on paper, but let me again explain this to you as I'm about to put this in here. Okay, because is buying and selling real estate highly emotional? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
When people are emotional, are they usually in clear thinking mode?
Nope.
No. So if I verbally tell them the terms of the contract, and then I just assume that, well, they got it. No. Okay. We discussed the terms. Now I've got the contract in front of me. I'm about to put pen to paper or ink to paper, whatever it goes. I just want to confirm this is what we're doing. And this is what this means. We're waiving the appraisal contingency. Yeah, I want to waive the appraisal contingency. Okay. Now, before I put that in there and send this off, I just want to make sure we understand what a waiving appraisal contingency means. Let me give you an example. Did you know that if you waive the appraisal contingency, you can't use the loan contingency? So let me give you, here's what I mean. If you waive the appraisal contingency and the appraisal comes in short, you can't use the loan contingency to get out of the deal. Now, there's some workarounds around that. You know, the lender would have to write a letter saying, well, because, you know, they don't qualify, they don't have enough money. But let's say, for example, if the appraisal comes in $20,000 short, and you say, well, we're going to cancel because the client doesn't qualify, the lender has to issue a letter saying the client doesn't qualify. But what if the client still does qualify? Now you can't use the loan contingency to cancel. So you need to be able to explain that to clients in terms of the contract and discussing the terms and everything along those lines. This is where deals fall apart, is there the clients don't read the contract, the agents don't know the contract, and then they just throw stuff on there without discussing it with the client in detail, and then it comes back to bite you later on. Okay, so spend the extra time, know the contract, be able to articulate the contract, know the terms, discuss the terms. It will come back. It will come back to get you. Okay, so just make sure you do that stuff up front. I wrote down here number 3, pre-approvals. Pre-approvals, probably the number one reason deals fall out of escrow is what? What's probably the number one reason deals fall out of escrow? Even more so right now.
The loans are afraid.
The loans. Both, Melinda. Yes, they are afraid. Okay. But in normal times, it's the loans. They don't qualify. They don't qualify for the property. Okay. And Melinda, we're going to get to your point, actually a couple points down. It's on the list. So pre-approvals, right? One of the biggest reasons loans fall out of escrow, and it's been this way for years, is that when it comes down to it, they don't actually qualify for the deal. So I wrote down a couple notes under pre-approvals. Most lenders will issue a pre-approval and they'll say this pre-approval is good for 90 days, right? I'm sure you've seen those. I want you to write something down here. Now I'm going to keep this as clean as I can. I'm going to say something without cursing. 90-day pre-approval letters are CRAP. A 90-day pre-approval letter is crap. Okay. Now, here's why I say that. Do you have any idea how much people's lives can change in 90 days? Their income could go up, their income could go down, they could co-sign a car, they could add a credit card, they could max out their credit card, which affects their credit. They could do all these things that when now comes time to open up escrow, they don't qualify. Happens all the time. And then they go, yeah, but I got a pre-approval letter from 60 days ago. It's useless. It's useless. Because here's why. I don't know, some of you might not know this. When you get pre-approved, the interest rate that they're quoting you on your pre-approval is not locked.
Mm-hmm.
Interest rates do not lock until you open up escrow. So if I go get pre-approved right now, a pre-approval essentially is saying that on August 22nd at 12:38 p.m., if you open up escrow right now, this is how much you would qualify for. But if at 12:39, the interest rate goes up 0.25%, my pre-approval letter changes. So we can't rely on 90-day pre-approval letters. So what I wrote down here is get an updated pre-approval letter weekly. Now, they don't have to run their credit every week. When you run someone's credit, it's good for 120 days, typically. Okay. But they can go to their lender and say, based on interest rates, based on loan programs, based on whatever, does my qualification change? Are interest rates fluctuating up and down pretty regularly right now? Yes.
Yep.
So they need to get updated every week. It might help them. They might say, well, actually, interest rates are down this week. So instead of 950, you qualify for 980. Interest rates are up this week. So instead of 950, you qualify for 900. That's important to know. Have them get in on a pre-approval letter weekly instead of every 90 days. All right. I wrote down here next, get an underwriting pre-approval. Get an underwriting pre-approval. Most lenders should be able to do this. And I'm going to explain something to you. This is the 30 secrets of lending I'm giving you right now. What an underwriting pre-approval is that the file actually goes to an underwriter. And the underwriter goes through the file and gives a pre-approval amount. And essentially that means that this file's already been underwritten. The income's already been approved, everything. We're just waiting on an appraisal, really. That is as powerful as a pre-approval as you can get, because here's the problem. Most loan officers, and I only say that, and Chris, I'm going to answer your question in a second. Most loan officers, and I'm sad to say this, but it's like this in any sales business, loans, real estate, anything, don't know how to read tax returns correctly. It's a true story. And if you don't know how to read tax returns correctly, you can't pre-approve somebody correctly. So this is where the problems are in. So a loan officer gives a pre-approval letter. A pre-approval letter is based on what the loan officer thinks that the client qualifies for. It has not gone to an underwriter, has not gone to anyone else, which means the loan, they might not even have all the paperwork. So it's vitally important that the file goes to an underwriting pre-approval. Now, to Chris's question in the chat box, is that the same as a DU approval? No. And here's why. A DU approval is a loan officer puts the information in the system and the system spits out it's the approval. So again, a DU approval is based on what the loan officer is putting into the system, not the underwriter. So it's slightly better than just a pre-approval letter. At least there was some computer automated system that gave out approval, but it's based on what the loan officer put in. And since most loan officers can't read tax returns correctly, the income they put into the system is probably incorrect. Or what they'll do sometimes is they won't get all the documents. Okay. And then it goes to the underwriter. The underwriter requires all documents for bank statements, W-2s, tax returns, and then little issues come up.
So thanks, Robert. So it's called a underwriting approval.
Called an underwriting pre-approval.
Underwriting pre-approval.
Yeah, and it just means that it goes to an actual underwriter to pre-approve the file. And it's actually really great for buyers in general because gives you a stronger offer as a buyer to say, hey, look, this file's already been underwritten. We already know even the conditions. We already know the letter of explanations we're going to need. We already know all this stuff.
So when you ask for that, does it normally take long? Well, actually, if
it'll take
if the buyer agent's good, they should have gotten that ahead of time.
Yeah.
While they're taking out. Okay. All right. Thanks, man. So
yes, it's a good question. Great point. It will take a little bit longer. So a lender might get you a pre-approval in, 24, 48 hours. Underwriting pre-approval might be, 3 to 5 days because they're going to do their actual escrows first, then they'll get to the pre-approval second, but could very much help you in terms of helping a deal fall out of escrow. All right, good stuff here. Okay, the next one I wrote down here are appraisal and inspections. Help prevent deals from falling out of escrow, appraisal, and inspections. Okay. So I wrote down here next is explain the process and the possible outcomes up front. The reason so many deals fall out after the inspection is that the buyer and seller are not prepared for when the inspection report comes out. Now, again, we already know what's going to happen. No matter how great the house is, this inspection report is going to come back and it's going to look dirty and ugly and awful and all these things. And so you already know that. So explain it to the clients up front of what an inspection is, what an appraisal is what the appraisal options are going to be. Look, we're going to do an appraisal. There's 3 possible outcomes for an appraisal. It's either going to come in at value, which is most likely. It's going to come in at higher value, which is less likely. And it's going to come in at lower, which is a possibility. Okay. Now, you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if it comes in at list price or above list price, hey, look, the buyer's good. Okay. If it comes in below list price, now we're going to have to negotiate because I'm sure the buyer's going to try to ask us to lower the price, and we're going to have to figure that out. And then you just have the same conversation with the buyer. So then it's not a surprise that this could possibly happen. Inspection report, same thing. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, okay, when's the last time you bought a property? It was 15 years ago. Okay, great. So I'm assuming you don't remember the inspection report from that house 15 years ago. No, I don't. Okay, well then let me explain to you what's going to happen when we do the inspection. Right. This inspection, and then you explain it to them. This inspection is going to come back and it's going to have a lot of red flags on it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean the house is about to fall down. but we can certainly talk about what the major things are, and we can obviously negotiate with the seller. But if you explain that to them up front, as opposed to they get the report and then they go, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? I can't buy this house. Look at this thing. And then the seller's pissed going, I'm not selling this house. I'm not cutting my price. This inspector doesn't know there's nothing wrong with this house. You don't explain it up front. So explain the possible outcomes up front. You already know what it's going to look like. Don't let it come as a shock to the client. Now, another thing you can do to prevent a deal from falling out of escrow is get the inspection done before you open escrow. So some of you already do this, where you'll tell the seller, look, we're going to do an inspection before we even hit the market. And that way, when buyers come to look at the property, they already know what the inspection is going to look like. So again, you eliminate that shock factor at the end. Okay. So vitally important. What I would also do too is ask especially if you have the listing, if you do open up escrow, is ask the buyer's agent, hey, did you explain, look, you and I obviously know what's going to happen when the inspection comes through. Have you already explained to your client what to expect on the inspection report? Like sometimes you have to be the leader, because if we're relying on other agents to do a good job, then we're kind of screwed. I'm not being mean. I'm just being real. This is not an industry that promotes good agents. I mean,
so can I ask a question or wait till the end?
Of course you can.
Okay, thanks, man. So as far as the what do you call it, the loan approval goes like this, how do you explain like to your client? I know how to explain, but I know what the difference between a conventional VA, FHA, right? When you get the offer and you try to let them know the difference. So kind of like, lead them ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
Would it be certain thing that you say, FHA, you explain what it is, but do you explain like what is the potential between a conventional and FHA would be in a VA? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
do you go deep into that before you tell them?
Yeah, you could certainly explain to them, as the offers come in, or even before the offers come in, there's going to be, multiple types of offers. We're going to have cash offers. Here's what a cash offer is probably going to mean. Okay. And you could also let them know ahead of time on that point is, hey, look, if we get a cash offer that's above list price, I'm not saying we shouldn't take it, but I want to give you a warning of what might happen once we get an escrow. Okay. Because most cash offers that are above list price tend to ask for a lot when it comes to inspections and stuff like that. Or we're going to get a loan, and there's a couple different types of loans. We have conventional loans, FHA, VA. Let me explain to you kind of the base differences in terms of how it affects you as a seller. Okay. In terms of qualifications, it's the same, right? They all have qualifications. Really, the only thing that affects you as a seller in those types of programs is VA and FHA have certain appraisal requirements. And so we just have to make sure,
internet connection,
Mr. Seller, that the property, is okay for VA and FHA appraisals. And if it is, then it's fine, because all the loan requirements are kind of the same.
Well, funny, because we haven't done FHA. I haven't done FHA in so long anyway. So, it's coming back. And then I found out I was trying to look at every little inch, about the house, but found out the FHA appraiser call out, like, on the eaves of the house, like little chip paint.
Yeah.
They called it out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, there's certain things that they're going to call out, chip paint. All the electrical units have to be covered. Can't have loose wires.
Right. Yeah.
Can't have things like that. So yeah, there are certain things.
Strict. Okay.
So when you go around the house and you notice that, hey, this house needs some upgrades, chances are an FHA or a VA appraiser is going to point some of this stuff out. Now, if you have a house that's in really good condition, then you might go, we're probably good.
So the last question is, as far as like, if you have one or two offers, I know you can kind of play around, look at it, but if you have one offers, what would be like, beside the term of the offers, what they're putting down and their pre-approval and stuff. Like my thing is like, you want to accept an offer, but at the same time, you're kind of nervous or kind of concerned, like, what kind of the agent's going to be, or what kind of thing it's going to be like, is there something that you would suggest to do that to avoid like potential issue later on with either with the agent or something?
So there's a way to search up an agent in the MLS. You can search up their closings and find out on the buyer side, on deals they represented the buyer, were there any concessions made?
Right.
So to answer your question, if I have two offers and one of these agents is someone that now all their deals seem pretty straightforward, and one of them is an agent where most of their buyer deals end up giving concessions, I have a couple options. I can either say, and assuming everything else is equal, and the seller says, well, they're all the same price, same terms. What do you think? Well, this agent has a history of everything kind of just goes through, and this agent has a history of asking for concessions in escrow. So if we go with this agent, chances are they're going to ask for money back, when the inspection report comes in or stuff like that. So that's something that you could certainly look for if all else is equal. Things along those lines. One of the other things you could look at is because chances are the buyer's not going to have an underwriting pre-approval, check out their pre-approval letter. Even if it is a DU approval, what's their debt to income ratio? Because if they give you a DU approval and the debt to income ratio is 48%, I have no wiggle room. So it's like, man, if this goes to an underwriter and the underwriter finds that they're $5 off, not going to qualify. So, I'm a little nervous about accepting this one as opposed to this one who's got a debt to income ratio of 40%. It's like, okay, well, I got some wiggle room. So even if the loan officer doesn't know what they're doing, I got some wiggle room to get the property still going forward, even if
right. Just basically you got to do all the homework and check everything.
Yeah, you gotta do and figure out what's best, things
even
along
so
those
too
lines. Obviously, but one of the things that can be, obviously you're looking at contingencies, you're looking at things like that, but one of the things that sometimes can be deceiving, I will tell you this from years of backgrounds of loan history, one of the things that sometimes can be deceiving is the size of the down payment. Well, this person's putting 50% down, so clearly they qualify more than the person who's doing an FHA deal. Well, maybe, but not necessarily, because there are sometimes people are putting down a large down payment simply because they don't show enough income to qualify. So they have to put down a large down payment, which means you still might run into a debt to income problem.
Right.
So you have to be careful about stuff like that. Obviously, if all else is being equal, you have a better chance with a higher down payment, but little things like that. The debt to income ratio is one of the biggest things though, because you have to make sure that you have to go in assuming that the loan officer missed something. And if you don't have a lot of wiggle room on a debt to income ratio, when the underwriter gets the file, you might run into a problem.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good question.
Robert, in that case also would...
Hold on one second, Michael. Yes, Tyrone.
Would it be wise to have your own lender look over
yes, you can always request that they cross-reference. You can always request that they cross-reference with another lender. But then again, what if they say, oh, I don't want to? Then it's like, oh, well, because some people won't want to because they'll feel pressure or things like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can always ask them to get cross-qualified, but if they don't want to, then you still have a decision to make of like, well, they didn't get cross-qualified. What do I do? But yeah, you could certainly ask that. But I will say this, okay, very important on this point. You cannot require anyone to use a specific lender.
Right.
Okay. Because that's grounds for expulsion.
Right.
Yes, Michael.
No, I'm just saying we're talking about from the buyer side here. Also for the seller side, especially when we take listings, typically the seller say from the beginning before they sign, I want to sell it as is. That's typically what they said. And we just sometimes go along, but we just tell them we have to do a home inspection no matter what. But you see the perception of the seller that is going to price it in a way that is going to sell it as is. And that is sometimes a problem that happens because the buyer expect to do the inspection and ask for a lot of things too. So that will be the question when you take the listing as well.
Yep. And that all 100%, that all goes down to motivation. That goes back to that. If the seller's really motivated, then you have a shot. If the seller's not really motivated, then you're going to have to go into this file or this deal that, letting the buyers know right up front. Look, we're going to sell it as is. Good. All right. Last thing I wrote down on this point here is, in order to help a deal fall out of escrow, is don't be afraid to split the costs. So here's what I mean. I'm gonna be brief on this because we're running up on time here, and I got a couple more points. If you're $10,000 apart, right, and it's the buyer is saying, I want the seller to come down $10,000 more, and the seller saying, I'm not coming down another penny. You're $10,000 apart, and and then the deal's about to fall out of escrow, which happens all the time. This is a last case scenario. Okay, is get everybody to split the cost. So here's what I mean. There's a buyer, there's a seller, and there's two agents. Whatever the cost is divided by 4, everyone puts in their part of it to get the deal done. So we're $10,000 apart. Hey, me as a listing agent, I'll put in $2,500. Buyer's agent, you put in $2,500. Buyer, you come up $2,500. Seller, you come down $2,500. We just made our $10,000. We just closed the $10,000 gap. So all everyone has to do, instead of $10,000 off, everyone just got to pitch in $2,500. Now, it's not ideal because we lose $2,500 on it, but if we need to save the escrow, split it 4 ways, much more manageable for everyone. All right, I wrote down here next, last couple points. We're going to go a little bit over 1 o'clock, but I'll go through this quickly. I wrote down decision makers. This is vitally important, because I've never, in my years of in sales, coaching, training, stuff like that, I've never seen a time more right now than this issue right now. Who is helping them with the decision? Ask them that multiple times. Who is involved in the decision-making process for both buyers and sellers? Now, here's the thing. It may not be the spouse, and it may not only be the people that are on title. So don't be specific. Don't say, well, is there anyone, is like, is your spouse going to be involved in this? I noticed that there's a Robert Hertel Sr. on title. Is that your dad? Yes, my dad. Okay, is he going to be involved? Don't just, who is involved? Who is going to be helping you with the decision? Because we are seeing so many deals fall out of escrow where it's like, oh, well, I talked to my brother. My brother doesn't want me to go through. Talk to my dad. I talked to my mom. I talked to my financial advisor. I talked to my cousin Ricky, who runs a blog about real estate from his parents' basement in Kentucky. Clearly, cousin Ricky knows things, right? So up front, we have to know who the decision makers are. And then when you find out the decision makers, have a conversation with them. Right? Melinda just put in there, parents of buyers are huge deal killers. Yeah, 100%. Are seeing this run rampant right now is the most crazy people. Well, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my this and that, which I always say, like, well, you know what? Before they can be a decision maker, they should probably ask you to marry them. But, I get in trouble when I say things like that. So I won't say that anymore.
Hey, Robert, and in many cases, it's not a decision making. Sometimes it happens to me a lot. Their kids, they go to high school, they don't want to move and leave their friends. Right. And you think the parents already got it all figured out. And then you find out the kids were the influence. And they say, we don't want to move.
Well, we and to Michael's point, we talk about this all the time, right? This is all part of the thing on selling a house, asking the question of saying, okay, great. Do you have any kids? Yeah, we have 2 kids. How old are they? 17 and 15. Okay. Are they involved in any activities? Yeah, well, my son is 17. He's the quarterback of the football team. My daughter is, part of the, she's a straight A student, part of the, dance and volleyball team. Okay. And you want to move them to a different state right now. Yeah. Are they aware of this? No. You might want to talk to them. Okay. So absolutely, you have to find out who is involved. There's people, the market is so crazy right now. There's so much misinformation out there that people are willing to listen to anyone. And one of the reasons they don't listen to you as much is because why? There's one main reason. Why do they tend to try to listen to other people instead of you? Come on.
They trust them.
No, has nothing to do with trust.
No.
They look to find somebody who has their same views.
That's true, but there's a bigger reason as to why they're willing to listen to someone else more than you.
Because they're not going after any commission we are.
There it is. There's no money involved. Well, Robert, yeah, of course you're going to tell me I should follow through with this house. You're getting paid at the end.
There you go.
But my cousin, or as Melinda put in a chat box, my investor buddy, he's not getting any money off of this. Got to find out who's involved and then have a conversation with them. Oh, well, you know what? My mom is a real estate agent out in Michigan. You know, I might be talking to her a little bit. Great. Let's get your mom on the phone. I want to make sure that she's comfortable with it too. Huge, 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 huge. All right. Last two things here. I know we're over, but last two things we're going to go over here. Okay. I wrote down this. This is also vitally important. What is on their mind? What is on their mind? I wrote down underneath that, what are their thoughts on the market right now? Ask them that question. What are your thoughts about the real estate market right now? Do you have any concerns about buying or selling a house right now? Because is everybody hearing something about the real estate market? Yes or no?
Yes.
They're hearing stuff all the time. Some of it's correct. Some of it's incorrect. Some of it, we might not know if it's incorrect or correct. You never know. So I'm not saying what they're hearing is wrong. I just need to know what's on their mind. Because let's say I'm dealing with a seller and they say, yeah, do you have any concerns about the market right now? Well, I am a little concerned, that I might be selling it too quickly because I think prices are still going up in the area. I need to know that, because if I don't know that up front, at some point, they're going to start thinking throughout the process, gosh, you know what? We're selling it for $950. I'm giving $10,000 for credits. I just feel like I'm underselling this. This is $1 million property. It's going to come up. Buyer, do you have any concerns? Yeah, I really think the market's going to come down. Okay, well, before we go show any property, before we open up escrow, we should probably address this situation. Otherwise, at some point, it will come up. We got to find out what's on their mind. What are they thinking about? What are their concerns? What's their views on the market right now? I wrote down here next from a buyer standpoint, whether it's a buyer or a seller who's then looking to buy, are you comfortable with the payment? Are you comfortable with the amount of down payment? This is coming up a lot too. Well, gosh, now that I see what the rate and the payment will be, this price of a home, I'm a little concerned. Are you comfortable with the payment? All this stuff will come up at some point. This is not going to close escrow with this still on their minds. So we need to find out up front more. What's on their mind? What are their thoughts? What are their concerns? What are their views on the market? What are they reading? What are you hearing? Okay.
Hey, Robert.
Or my favorite question, one second, Michael, or my favorite question that you should ask everybody, whether it's a lead or right before you open up escrow. I'm sure you've heard, read, or seen something about the real estate market recently. What questions do you have that I can answer? Yes, Michael.
No, I just asking you. I know you were talking at the beginning. I probably missed it. What is probably the biggest reason right now is the most cancellations as a company? I mean, I don't know if you said
loans. Loans.
The loans are
loans.
It's not people. It's not people changing their mind, right?
That's higher than it's ever been. Is people changing their minds, and it's usually because they heard somebody else is in their ear.
Right.
We're not getting, based on my talking to people, based on stuff that I talked to, whether in our company and masterminding with people outside the company, it's typically not an individual saying, you know what, I want to get out of this. There's somebody talking to them and telling them that this is not a good idea. And that's why they back out. But number one is still, they don't qualify. They got a pre-approval letter. The interest rates changed. The loan options may have changed, and then it falls out of escrow. That's still number one, and will probably always be number one. But more than ever, it's people canceling because I changed my mind, and it's usually because someone else is in their ear. All right, the last thing here I wrote down here to prevent deals from falling out of escrow is be the calming force. Be the calming force. We mentioned earlier, real estate is an emotional transaction. It's a stressful transaction. So if somebody's under stress and highly emotional and you become highly emotional, do people tend to continue to move forward or stop? They stop. I'm highly emotional. I'm stressed out. And now you're adding to that. I'm done. And that's what happens sometimes. They're highly emotional. They're highly stressed. And then we pressure. And then they shut down. They feel the desperation because we need the money. So they shut down. Right? They can sense that we're frustrated. Well, I'm thinking about backing out. And we go, okay, good start. I don't remember that in the script. Right? So be the calming force. Don't pressure them. Don't sound frustrated. Don't sound desperate. And constant communication. Updating them all the time. Updating them all the time. All right. Questions on any of this stuff that we went over here today? No? All right. I apologize for going over, but hopefully there